You're listening to Lemon's Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality. Welcome to this episode of L3, Lemon's Listening Library. I'm Randy Lemons, or RL Rose to those of you in the romance community, and I am joined today by my fantastic co-host, Kathy. Kathy, would you like to tell everyone about yourself?
I'm Kathy Ireland. I am obviously your co-host, but I also do audiobook production for authors, and I also I just read audiobooks like a crazy person. So
what did we dub the audiobook connoisseur?
Nice. Right. Nice.
All right. And before we introduce our guest that we are super excited to talk to today, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. If you guys are interested in having your products or services announced on the show, head over to our Patreon account, check that out. It's a great way to get your services out there to people who are interested in them, because we host to the book community, but also it's a great way to support the show. So check that out if you're interested. And now the moment that you've all been waiting for, we are so excited to introduce Chris. Wow. I just looked down at your name and read that. Chris, would you tell our listeners about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Chris Cole, last name, also known as Max Stormrage in some instances. I'm a voice actor / singer-songwriter / keynote speaker. So very just eclectic thing. Let's see. When I'm not doing this, I'm a proud father of 4 wonderful children, and an outdoors and pop culture and horror advocate.
Did you say horror advocate?
Horror. I have a very deep voice. Horror.
What is a horror advocate?
Okay.
What is that, Chris? Right there.
I just want to keep saying horror advocate.
Lord. Yep. It's very book talk appropriate. That's for sure.
Well, I feel like the other way that I'm trying to say it is book talk appropriate too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, we want to know.
Yeah, but tell us about that. What is that?
Oh yeah. All right.
Nice try though. Not slick, but we're slicker.
Oh Lord. Yeah. Right. Oh man. Well, horror advocate is just that I love scary movies, and that's pretty much it.
Oh my God, I think this is my favorite intro to a podcast ever already.
Listen, it's bad enough with a deep voice, but then whenever I'm relaxed and my Appalachian comes out, then I can't pronounce things anyway properly. So it's like, oh yeah, I like horror movies. I bet you do, man.
Listen, Chris, I'm a horror advocate too. Okay.
All right. Yep, that'll work.
Kathy, it's why choose. What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Yeah, I'm not a horror advocate.
Yeah.
Horror freaks me out.
Horror. No, I get you.
Well, see, horror freaks me out. That's
I'm
crazy.
Slow. I'm tired. I had to set my alarm to get up today, y'all. That was not fun. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's great. Well, Cole, this is our show. We like to be crazy. We like to just be authentic, and we like to say the first thing that comes to Randy's mind because she doesn't know how to not do that.
Like my last name again.
Exactly.
I saw
that is me
100%. Kris Kringle. Like, I'm so in the...
Oh, that's funny. It's not gray enough for that.
No, you can totally be the young Kris Kringle, though.
That's right.
Yeah. Especially with your
CC
plaid.
The flannel, yeah. Well, I normally wear my cowboy hat too, but the headphones, it's weird with the headphones, you know? So, yeah. Be like that.
Oh. Do you need to leave and come back in, Kathy? She's going to come back in. Her recording stopped for some reason.
Oh, that's not good. Oh, look, I can do over your headphones and the cowboy hat. Sweet.
There you go. That is just a pleasing for half of our audience, so it's fine. Or probably into the other half, too, I'm sure.
Right? Oh, man.
Did it come back on?
I guess.
Hopefully. She's like, I don't know.
Yep, I see you now.
Yep.
I see you on the recording now. Cool.
Okay, good. And now we're all switched in order. Right. People are going to be like, wait, what?
Yeah,
it's fine.
right.
I think that happened on our last one too, in like whenever you had to do that on that, so it's not a big deal.
Funny.
All right, so I have actually joined some of your lives and listened to you, like when you sing and stuff like that. And I've listened to you read narrations live. So your voice is kind of your platform of expressing yourself.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I feel like aside from just having a good voice, so I've been told, it's hard to say that I'm good at things, right? That's the self-deprecation. But aside from having a nice voice, my skill set is people and public speaking and interpersonal communication, and it's like my passion. So whatever I can do to make money doing that so I can survive, and then also help people by whether it's keynote speaking or I'll do at my local coffee shop, I'll do poetry readings and like Lovecraftian horror readings and stuff like that. But goodness gracious, see, Lovecraftian horror readings.
Oh, you're fine. That time it didn't get me.
Oh, it didn't? Oh, so you're used to it. Okay. All right.
We're in there.
And,
yeah.
And then obviously the singer-songwriter thing. So really just my voice and using it to, I don't know, communicate. Is what I love to do.
So what was the first thing that you kind of fell into with expressing with your voice?
That would be singing. 24 years ago is when I started singing, and it was almost 24 years. Yeah, 24 years ago. And then my first like solo performance was there was a 9/11 tribute at a high school, and I wasn't in high school yet, but at a high school, and I sung "Proud to Be an American."
Really?
And
I love that song.
Then I just kind of like went from there. Yeah, me too. I went from there to stage acting and being in drama, while also learning guitar and just kind of like crafting my voice. And probably the last thing that I got into was really narration. Yeah.
How did that come
Because
about?
book talk made you?
Not book talk. I mean, I wanted to be a voice actor for a long time. And it was something that I've been told for years and years and years, like, hey, you need to be on radio. Like, you've got a face for radio. Get on radio right now. And I'm like, okay, I appreciate that. But I would always be like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but you're wrong, and I'm really bad. Like, nobody wants to hear me, because that's what we do as artists. We do that a ton. And eventually, with the way just life worked out, I happened to find ACX, which is wonderful. It's what we all use for book talk, for audiobooks. It is the low-hanging fruit, if you will, of the narration world, but it's like the barrier to entry is low. So when you want to get into the industry, you can start at ACX and really get like a foundation going, and then kind of take off from there.
Yeah. And just, I know we've explained this on previous podcasts, but ACX is, do you want to explain what ACX is for our people?
Sure. Yeah. ACX is it's the kind of the background of Audible, right? So Amazon is the one that does Audible, and on the background, authors put up their books that they want to be narrated on the ACX website, and then narrators also have profiles where they can audition for and or be requested to audition for audiobooks.
It's the dating app of the narrators on audiobook people.
That's right. That's good.
Swipe right.
That's right.
That's a great way to describe it, Kathy. So did you have to overcome that? And I think this is such a great topic to talk about, but did you have to overcome that voice that said you're not good enough to start doing this? Or were you able to start doing this with still having that voice of like, you can't do this, man?
Well, that voice never leaves, guys. That, I mean, I could be speaking incorrectly to say this, but I feel like anybody who does anything creative deals with that voice. And if anyone, in my opinion, if you say, oh, I don't have that, I don't know if I believe you. Like like, there's got to be there to some extent to me. And mine is, I mean, it varies in its degree of strength and how hard it hits me. Like sometimes I'm like, yeah, like my voice is pretty good today. But I still battle with while I'm getting accolades, or even while I think I'm doing a good job, there is something in my head that says they're just saying it to appease you, or like you're really not that good, or you could be better. So it's a constant battle, 100%.
I think that well, I agree and definitely see that amongst like my narrator friends, that kind of like
Mm-hmm.
an imposter syndrome type of thing. But I
Yes.
do think that that is kind of really something that everybody struggles with, that is like a great thing to connect with other people that aren't
Yeah.
creative, right? Because we all struggle with that, and it makes me wonder, where does that come from? Like, is that just the world
Mm-hmm.
beating the shit out of people, or is it, like you know, like a parental fail on people? And but I don't think, like, my parents were always pretty encouraging, but I always had that, like, this insecurity that I was just
Sure.
never enough.
Sure. I think that it comes from a plethora of things. I mean, you could have, the most supportive upbringing possible, and at the same time, the world that we live in and have lived in for a long time, and it's getting progressively worse in this manner, is there's always a standard, right, that we're held to, no matter what. If you're, girl, boy, it doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing. There's a standard that even if it's not directly set upon you from somebody else, it's just there, right? Whether it's looks or production quality, or how much you can get done, the degree you get, owning a house, in your mid 30s, or not owning a house in your mid 30s, like it's there. And in my case, I grew up in extreme poverty, right? And one of the things I'm passionate about is helping people defeat a poverty mentality, which is something that has taken me a long time to do, which is something I'm actually going to be starting a podcast on, specifically with Appalachia. But in that poverty mentality, there was this idea from my parents whenever they divorced on both sides. So with my dad and my stepdad, my mom was always supportive, but my dad and my stepdad always kind of had this unsaid standard, right, that I was held to. With my dad, it was things like kind of just not being good enough. There's a specific instance that I remember when I was learning to play guitar, and I had mentioned to him wanting a Les Paul at some point, right? Because it's like the creme de la creme of guitars. And I remember he said, "Well, son, you can get a Les Paul when you're good." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, thanks, Dad." And that just stuck for a long time. And whether he meant it like you're just not good enough or you won't be good enough, like as a child, that stuck. And then with my stepdad, it was the idea of, and this is very common, especially for like millennials and Gen X, is like the idea of like, holding the flashlight for your dad whenever he's working on the car, and then he smacks you whenever you don't hold it right. Or like go to find the tool, and he's like, "Go get me a pair of channel locks," and you're like 10, and you're like, "I don't know what that is." So you grab a pair of pliers, and he's like, "What are you, stupid?" And it builds that complex. But even without that, society does that by itself. And the more that we have gotten into social media and everything instantaneous and seen all the time, and the standard of perfection that is put out on all social media platforms, and never really seeing the real behind it, the bar just has been raised and raised and raised.
Yep. We have completely taken away any sort of access to like Google. You would think that Google is a helpful tool for kids who have questions, right? My
Right.
kids are not allowed to have Google because my son Googled how to be a perfect gentleman. You think that's just a very innocent thing to Google. The amount of pressure that he then put on himself because of the results that he got from how to be a gentleman, it sent him into this spiral because he was constantly comparing himself to what he wasn't doing, what he wasn't able to uphold. And so I agree 100% that now,
Yeah.
in today's society, it's the information that is just kind of stacking on top of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to go back to I like that you mentioned, the identity thing, and because if you think about it, when we are kids, we think most kids, unless this is knocked out very early, but most kids think we can do anything, we can accomplish anything. And there is, just like in your case, there's a voice that gets put in there that's not our voice that is telling us that we're not good enough. And I think that that's where it starts to come in from, is whether it's our parents, whether it's a mentor, whether it's other kids, or just society, they put a voice in there that's not ours that says you're not good enough. And that's that voice that
Yes.
we keep hearing.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm a big proponent of like therapy and psychology. I know in our initial talks, I was telling you about how much I'm into that, and I remember you were like, "Oh, and I hope you're going to do a podcast on that stuff," which that's still in planning. But I'm a big fan of the internal family system, IFS. Okay, it's a part of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's the idea that you have your you as a whole, and then over time, you kind of create these like wounded parts, right, of yourself, and then you create managers and firefighters. And there's other words for them, but managers and firefighters, like rush whenever there's a problem or try to manage things. And I mean, in my case, realizing that I have like things like my dad as a manager, and then my ex father-in-law as a manager, where there was just a lot of pressure and when things happen. So part of that for me, part of that imposter syndrome and that self-deprecation that I deal with is, it's not even me saying it to myself. It's almost like hearing the voices of these men that were in my life at one point or another, showing me that you aren't at the place where you think you are. And then if you say that you are, so the other part of that is, if I say that I'm good at something, I immediately apologize because I feel like I'm being an egotist or a narcissist. I'd be like, I just want to preface you, I'm not an egotist, but I do have a pretty good voice. And people are like, why would complimenting yourself mean you're a narcissist? I'm like, I don't know. It's what I was told.
Well, and I think that that's the backlash, right? So it's kind of the boomerang effect. I don't know the boomerang effect, but it's the extremes. So we go from one extreme of, like super confident, super, I can do anything. I can, be a superhero. I can do whatever. To then the backswing over here is, oh, you can't, you can't have that kind of confidence. That's being cocky and arrogant, and that's being a narcissist, and all these buzzwords that really are just killjoys, and in and of themselves can be very, I think, detrimental to a person, where we really just need to kind of come back to like normalcy here. We're just normal people, just trying to do the best we can every day, and it's okay to be proud of ourselves and have confidence and know our strengths and know our weaknesses. And I think that that's being very self-aware to know and acknowledge those things. And
Yes.
Yeah. I want to even go a little bit further with that, is I think even that middle ground can fuck kids up. I think that having parents who don't necessarily have expectations, or don't necessarily, because that sounds like my parents when I'm thinking about it. Like, my mom and dad didn't have expectations for me. They didn't believe, they weren't like, I push you and to do the best that you can possibly do, or I don't think you can do anything. It was kind of that middle ground.
Yeah.
And so by them not having these expectations of me, I immediately was like, oh, you don't believe I can do this? I'm going to show you I can do anything. And so I think so much of it is what we run with in our heads, the narrative that we run with, even though they didn't say that. They never said they didn't believe I could do that stuff. That's what I took on and just believed. Right. And I think our own narrative just fucks us over sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I like I said, my mom was supportive, but she didn't push, right? There was never an expectation of a particular grade, right? It was, even when I failed, it was like, oh, okay, well, I know you'll do better next time. And that was coupled with I don't know if I would call it a natural intelligence, but I've always learned easily. And because of that, I would turn it into a game because I'd get bored. So for things like tests, I've never studied for anything. I would always just take the test to see what score I could get just on my raw knowledge. And it would screw me up sometimes. I was not a straight A student, but I never had anyone pushing me to be like, you can do better. You can do this. Right. And I took that in the same way of like, well, it's not that you don't believe I can't do any specific thing. It's like, well, you don't it's almost like you don't care. You don't care about what I do. So I guess I'll just get a construction job and do what everyone else has done in my family and go, get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to travel out of state to work. And like, that's what I'm like determined to break in my children and even adults that I meet that are stuck in that like rut of being like, well, I'm just not college material. I'm just not the kind of person that could be create my own business.
What was your moment that broke that? Because you're obviously changing your path. You're breaking away from the things that you grew up knowing. But was there a moment? Was there something where you're like, I need to break this habit. I need to break this generational thing.
Yeah. It's a duality. The thing that happened was a duality because the family that I married into was the exact opposite, right? They're all entrepreneurs. They're like my ex-father-in-law is CEO for 40 something years and they like push their kids. All right. So marrying into and living with, because we lived with them for our first 5 years, was like this extreme shove in the opposite direction of like, I was like shattered out of it. And I still struggled with it because there was like a safety net of, well, my in-laws will take care of things if we don't make it. And then I feel like that rebuilt my foundation on a poverty mentality and what it like there that I actually can succeed in hearing, my in-laws stories and seeing other people that are making it. And then once I kind of left that and went back into like my own independence, being like, okay, well now I have that foundation and I can still add in the positive aspects of how I grew up and what it really means to be like a hillbilly and things like that without the poverty mentality. But I would say just that extreme shove in the opposite direction is what did it for me.
Explain to people what you mean by poverty mentality.
Sure. Okay. So this is something that I talk to people about, and this is something that I mean when I say this, I think it's generalized. I just use this as a specific example. It's an Appalachian thing for me, okay? But it doesn't just mean Appalachian. It means anybody in the country, anyone in the world. Appalachians are kind of like currency. They've always been kind of currency historically. They were modern day slaves in coal mines, right? And as generations went on in these coal mines, and it was kind of like this thing of like you're born, you work, and you die, and that's it. Like you don't have any aspirations. You're not going to go to college and make something of yourself. You're not going to invest and kind of get out of the situation you're in. You're just going to survive. It's really survival. So poverty mentality for me is, I don't know. You don't reach beyond what you're born into, what your means are, never make progress for yourself, and you kind of just survive and make sure your kids are fed, that you have a place to live, and that's it. And it's quite depressing to kind of be stuck with it.
I've always thought of poverty mentality as like a mental rut, in a road. Like you get down in that rut and then it's very hard to get out unless you make very purposeful knee jerk, like to get out. You know what I'm saying? It's like an expectation
absolutely.
of just the status quo.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it reminds me of a study of, they studied monkeys in this environment where they would put apple or bananas on top of this top platform. And every time any of the monkeys went to go get the apple or the bananas on the top platform, they would get sprayed by water. And eventually they would start pulling the other monkeys down from going up to the top platform to get the bananas because they didn't want to get sprayed by water.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think of like, if you are surrounded by people who are in that rut, getting out, you also get pulled back down by all the people who are afraid to go through the cold water and get the results.
Yep. Where I'm from, there's a very heavy emphasis on, I'd say like 3 phrases, and this encompasses like the mindset, right? Is must be nice. You forgot where you came from, right? And when am I going to get mine? And those are like the 3 things, right? So when I had the fortune of my mom taking me out of where I'm from in West Virginia, right? A little town of 500 people still now. It's like the population as of 2020 is like 500 people. Okay. And she took me out. So I was born and somewhat raised in West Virginia. And then I went to Central Virginia, Fredericksburg, and there's more opportunity there. I don't want to go move back there, but there's more opportunity there. But since moving out, and then especially whenever I moved out here to Colorado, where I am now, it turned into like people in my family, not everybody, but people being like, you forgot where you came from, and you're highfalutin now, and
Colorado.
why don't you take care of your family? And I'm like, well, I mean, you guys can, but there's this idea, and my point here is that when you are around these people, like you're saying, and kind of like pulling the monkeys back down, it's like they didn't make it. So there's two things. There's like, they just assume you won't make it because they didn't make it. And they don't want you to make it because they're like, I didn't get to do it. There's no way in hell you get to do it. Get back down here. No, go get a job, running heavy equipment. That's what you need to do. And you'll have a solid job, and that's it. Don't go and try to build your business. Like most of my family right now, which I have, with what I'm trying to build with the voice stuff and becoming a keynote speaker and things like that, they're like, you're absolutely insane, boy. What are you doing? Like, I'm like, well, I'm trying to make something like, for myself and for my generations going forward, my lineage.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I just needed a heavy sigh there. No,
Sometimes
it's hard. It is so hard when you have all of the people around you who, this is something that I experienced as I started working on my mental health and started elevating my awareness, is that coming to acceptance of everyone else around me is going to stay where they're at. They most of the time have no desire to also kind of work on themselves and better their lives. Like, that acceptance was hard for me because, like, when I started doing my stuff and realizing that it's changing my life for the better, my communication is amazing, all these different aspects in my life are just being elevated, I wanted other people around me to experience how awesome that is. But then you have to realize there is a level of not having the awareness that makes it easier to just be okay with how things are. Like,
Yeah.
And I don't think that they're okay with it because they don't know there's better. I think it's just a safety thing for them. They're so used to going through the motions that they've gone through, whether or not they're good, bad, or ugly, that it's the safety now that is what they strive to keep.
Absolutely.
And they do things, if you think about, my ex's grandparents went through the Dust Bowl. And so they always had that poverty mentality that's just what was gonna, something's gonna happen. So, I mean, they would have like cases of green beans, like just stashed under all the beds,
Yep.
and it's like,
Yep.
it's just like, it's like an expectation that's just where they're going to be.
It's always doom and gloom.
It's always
doom and gloom.
Yeah, exactly.
So as you started pulling yourself out of this life, right? I'm sure that there are things that you had to break away from. There are things that you had to overcome. And we've kind of talked a little bit, about things that I don't know if you directly overcame them or if you saw other people overcome them, but with like addiction and self-harm and stuff like that. Are those things that, you kind of, how do I ask this question? When you broke away from that kind of stuff, what did it feel like? Was it easy to break away from? How did you kind of go through creating a new life that you haven't had modeled for you before?
Sure.
Can I interrupt real quick? Because I think that we might need to do some trigger warnings here just a little bit, just in case people might have some, I don't even know what they are, but I'm just saying there might be some coming up. So
that's a good idea.
Fair.
So I do get deep. So the trigger warning.
Anybody listening?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can throw them on the beginning too before people jump into this episode.
Okay. So I've stated before in conversations with people, I like to consider myself a safe space for anybody, right? And in that, I'm extremely open about everything that's happened to me over my life. Okay, so I've struggled somewhat with addiction. I have done. This is a good resume right here. I have done everything except for heroin and meth. Okay, and crack. At some point, mainly in my teens. Teens were really rough. Okay. I struggled mostly with narcotics for a time. That was I won't say an easy break. So I'm just kind of going through things here. I struggled with self-harm at 10 years old because of just the way I was raised and bullying and abuse, things like that. And let's see.
Well, and you definitely don't have to list everything out, but
For sure.
I like the breaking the mindset. Like, did you believe that you were an addict, and did you have to break that mindset? Or did you believe that you were someone who did self-harm and then you had to break that mindset? Or do you feel like those are just things that you can kind of slip into and then slip out of?
Sure. I would say growing up and the way that I was raised around what I was raised around, yes, I fully believed that that I was supposed to be addicted to something because almost everybody around me was. I believed that I would eventually end up alone in a bar, divorced, because that's what my dad was. So I was like determined that's what right. Same thing with self harm. It was I was around it so much that it's just kind of like how I was raised, right? Some of the abuse that happened to me until I figured out in therapy that it wasn't okay. Like it was I was like, oh, this is what happens to boys, right? It literally was like that. So when I had said earlier that there was like this this giant shove in the opposite direction, and when it came to seeing people that weren't in a poverty mentality, like in a class change type of thing, there were negatives that came with that, and that came in the form of control and kind of narcissistic control in a different way. And it wasn't until I became independent, really, guys, like at like 30, 33, like a year ago, that I truly figured out breaking and building and saying that I don't have to be. First of all, I had already learned I don't have to be what I was raised to be by that point. But then I learned I don't have to be what this other side has made me believe that I have to be. I don't have to dress the way they told me to dress. I could still be proud of where I come from and not do the things that are considered negative that of where I come from, right? In that respect. So something that helped me a ton with that, and I remember us talking about it a little bit, is the Enneagram. Huge. I mean, that's going to be part of the emphasis of the thing that I want to do is helping people through my experiences and through the Enneagram personality assessment and that whole category system.
How did that help you?
I think no, yeah. Yes, Chris, that's a good question. How did that help you? Because I love the Enneagrams.
Yeah. So Enneagram is insanely popular, as we know, right? It's huge right now. And it's very popularized, but here's the problem is much like a lot of other personality assessments and just popular things, people become a quote unquote slave to their personality. All right. And they go, oh, I do this because I'm a 7 or a 6 or whatever. So they like, okay, an 8 is more of like a type A, like I'm going to, get what I want type of thing. And people will be like, I'm sorry, I'm being such an asshole. I'm just an 8. They'll literally become like a slave to whatever that is. So, but the point of the Enneagram is to free yourself from those constraints. Literally to say, out of these 9 personality types, this is the one that I most identify with. And I identify with these almost like weaknesses and pitfalls. Okay. And those weaknesses and pitfalls aren't to be like, well, I'm just stuck in this rut and that's it. It's supposed to be, this is how I can get out of this rut of this personality and encompass all of these. That's the whole point. The point of the assessment and researching your personality type is to kind of break the chains of that personality. You're always going to have a proclivity towards a certain thing. Like I'm a 9, right? I'm always going to be a mediator, and I always have struggle with confrontation. But if I know that, then I know ways to kind of defeat that and embody those other types that I have weaknesses in.
I've never heard.
Yep. And if you, yes. And it's such a good book too, Kathy. You should read the Enneagram book.
Take on it.
Well, it's in the book. It even tells you that as you level up your awareness, you go, like I'm a type 7. So when you go into a healthy type 7, you kind of become other Enneagram types. And the ultimate goal is to take the best pieces from each one. And that's who you are.
Yeah.
See,
Yep.
I mean, I haven't like delved into it real much, real deep, because my experience is people use the Enneagrams a lot and like their zodiac as a justification for their shitty behavior.
Yes. All the
Oh,
time. All
it's
the
like,
time.
oh, I'm an Aries, or I'm a Scorpio, or I'm a Leo, so I can be, what,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
two.
Well, I think people use identity. Well, okay. I think that there is a good side and a bad side to identity. If you are so boxed in with your identity that you can't grow, like me and
Yeah.
my husband were talking about this the other day. We are going to be remarried to two completely different people in 10 years. Like
Yeah.
we're not going to be the same as
Right.
we are now. And
Absolutely.
if we I feel like if we want to continue to be healthy, we should expect to be with different people. We should expect
Hmm.
for everything to change in 10 years. If we look back and we're like, we are the exact same people we were 10 years ago, I don't think that that's healthy. I don't think that that's not what I would like to
Okay,
achieve.
can I ask a question? I'm
Of
sorry. I
course.
just want to, because I want you to clarify something on that, Randy. So are you saying two different people within your marriage, like you have grown?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Listen,
what,
I'm just clarifying here. I'm like, Jesus, Randy,
yeah.
No, in
you
10 years,
wear
I'm going to
this?
be a swinger.
We got the soundbite. Yep, we got our episode soundbite right there. We already talked about it. We're gonna be remarried in 10 years, so
Be remarried. Yeah, no. To the same people. We're going to be physically the same people, but
yeah.
Growth.
everything else, our identity, our
Yes.
beliefs, like I've said this before, don't hold me to what I say now in 5 or 10 years. I always reserve the right to change my mind, to change my opinion,
Right.
and to grow from what I know in my life at this moment right now.
Yeah. I used to. I've always been into personality stuff. Psychology's been my thing. My overall goal is to still get my master's so I can get my license and open a practice. Like that's what I want to do. In the meantime, I can help people just unlicensed ways. But I've always been into personalities, and before the Enneagram became popular, I still love, but I was hugely into the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, right, MBTI, and I'm an ENFP, and I used to in high school. And right after high school, I would literally read the other personality types and go, well, because I'm an ENFP, I can't think of things logically. I can't I can't do that because it's not my personality. So as a 9 and a 2, so 9 is the peacekeeper, 2 is the helper. Both personalities, the biggest weakness is we let people walk all over us, and we're non-confrontational. I'm not a confrontational person. I want
Kathy's
to
a
throw
2.
up.
That's me.
Yep. Yeah.
100%.
Yep. So I'm literally like 9 and then 2's right below. And my therapist is huge in the Enneagram, but she does it in such a healthy way that she's like what she's taught me, about how breaking the chains and stuff like that. But if I go, well, I'm a 9 and I'm a 2, so that means that I can like I'm not allowed to go negotiate with people, or I can't go do some adrenaline junkie 7 thing, or all these other things. It's foolishness, but that's the way that a lot of people think about it. It's the way I thought about it, and I feel like it was my therapist really showing me, yes, you're a 9 and you're a 2, but this is like, you're not supposed to just be stuck to that. You're supposed to break out of that so that you can encompass all 9 personality types. And on top of that, I remember going, well, I'm the 2 personalities that, let people walk all over me. And it's my biggest, pitfall. And I never stand up for myself. So I literally battled in my head. Like there's a part of me that's like, well, you can never stick up for yourself, Chris, because it's just not your personality. So, and then the other part was like, dude, screw this. Like, what the hell are you talking about? No, I can learn to be okay with, like, it's never not going to bother me at my core to be in a confrontation. It's never not going to do that. But I have learned over the last couple of years, especially, that I can. I've had some key confrontations that I remember talking to my therapist right before going, I don't know what to do. And she's like, well, what do you think is going to happen? And this is what happens in my head, guys. It's so crazy that people go, what's the worst someone can say? No, or like, I don't like that, or no, thank you. I'm like, no, the worst that can happen is they're going to stab me. They're going to want to kill me. And that's what happens in my head. And it's so illogical, right? So I would call my therapist and be like, this is what's about to happen. She's like, it's okay. And she's like, this is what you need to do. So I would do whatever it was, go through the confrontation. And inside my amygdala hijack, like I'm going crazy, right? But I go through it. And at the end, I'm like, that, and I talked to her afterward, and she's like, so what happened? I'm like, nothing. And she's like, say that again. And I'm like, nothing happened. And she's like, exactly. So what you're doing in your head is ridiculous, right? Like, she didn't say ridiculous. You don't say it as a therapist, but Actually, she does to me because that's the kind of relationship we have.
I
But
think a good
she's like,
therapist should say that's ridiculous.
yeah. Instead of it, yeah. So she's like, that's ridiculous, right? Because the outcome may not have been exactly what you wanted, but it wasn't some crazy, they're going to want to kill you now, right? And I'm like, no, actually, we're fine. So I've learned that confrontation is one of the most healthy things that you can possibly, you can't grow unless you are confronting in some way. It doesn't mean you got to go be an asshole. But as a teenager, it was either, I was a very angry teenager. So I was like, I have to avoid confrontation. Otherwise, I'm going to punch somebody in the head. Right. And it turned into being fearful of other people punching me in the head, so to speak. And then now I'm learning like, okay, there's an okay way to do this that is beneficial to both people. Anyways, that's like the whole point is you grow outside and look at the forest for, stop looking at the forest for the trees or whatever, if you will. And
Yeah.
yes.
Oh my gosh, you hit on so many things I want to go back to. So, first I want to say growth is uncomfortable. Like,
Yes.
when have you ever gone through something that is a growth session and in the process of the growing been comfortable? Like think of growing pains. Think of,
I was just
what?
thinking that growing pain.
Yeah.
Pruning.
And so this is something that I had to learn. It was being comfortable in the uncomfortable. Like knowing that the uncomfortableness meant there's going to be something awesome coming out of this, and then getting excited about that.
Yeah.
Shifting your mindset in those sort of areas was what helped me.
Right.
But you said amygdala hijack.
Yes.
Explain what that is, because
Absolutely.
I love that phrase.
Me too. Man, people don't give enough credit to this. So everyone knows it as fight or flight. Okay. That's what we know it as. That's fight or flight. But it is legitimately called an amygdala hijack because the amygdala section of your brain kind of takes over, right? It's a primitive thing that happens, and that's what fight or flight is. It's this adrenaline, but it's more than fight or flight. Okay, it has evolved, and then it evolved again. It'll probably evolve again. Okay, but it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn is the newest one. Okay, and so fight and flight are kind of obvious. You either, you're going to sit there and knock some dude out, or you're going to run away to save your life. Freeze, I feel like, is obvious too. It's like, I can't make a decision. I don't know what to do. And you just kind of shut down. That's terrifying. I've never had that one happen. But fawn is what my tendency is. Okay. And actually, I shouldn't say this. This is part of it. Not because of my personality, but
okay.
For
but you just had
reason.
an awareness part right there, because you had a belief system that wanted to tell you something, and you
Yep.
immediately stopped it.
Yep. Because most of my life, because of my personality. That's what everyone does. Because of my personality. Okay. Because of what I've done historically and the way I was raised, whatever factors led into this, I fawn. And fawning is whatever situation it is. In my case, a lot of the time it was some type of narcissistic abuse and type of like getting yelled at for something. And I would just kind of turn into this, okay, you're right. Whatever you say, I'll do whatever you want. Yep. And then you just kind of, that's fawning, right? It's the, it's like that, the thing of like, well, you've been held hostage by a serial killer for so long that eventually you don't ever want to leave. Right. Or what's that? What was that study that they did? Oh my goodness, there's no one to forget it, with the prisoners. I'm a psychology guy, and I'm like, what's that thing they did in psychology?
I love psychology, and I will forget, like, the study with the monkeys. I know there's a name for it. I know that I don't know what it was called.
Yeah, it's the prison something. Right. But the prisoners eventually like started working with the prison guards because they're like, they try to appease. It's an appeasement. And that has always been my go-to. And there are several books and on fighting an amygdala hijack. Funny to say fighting, but the biggest thing is working on being grounded and being what's that word, man? Oh my, there's no, when you're present, right? There's a word for it when you just like mindfulness. That's it. Mindfulness. And practicing mindfulness every day. And each time it happens, and you get more proficient at doing it when a situation arises, and then you're able to take back control and make a decision that isn't fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, because those are not the only decisions. They're not analytical decisions.
I think I
Yeah.
think that because after hearing that, like I'm being a 2, whatever, Enneagram, like I'm very much a people pleaser is a very
Hmm.
common terminology that is used for that. And it took me many, many situations of being
Mm.
on the short end of that stick,
Yeah.
allowing myself to be taken advantage of or
Mm.
mistreated or whatever, whatever the case may be. And I finally had to get to that, fuck this, I'm done. Like, I do not need to put up with this
Yeah.
shit anymore. And not have like, a complete knee jerk reaction where you just become like a total bitch to everybody, but to understand that
Yeah.
there are
I go the
healthy
opposite way.
boundaries and that they are okay. It is okay to have
Yeah.
healthy boundaries
You have to.
with family, friends, work. Like you have to have healthy boundaries because really everybody, I mean, it's kind of almost a natural thing that people, if you allow them, they will. If
Oh,
you allow them,
absolutely.
they will.
Yeah. And
So
there's
nobody's going to stick up for you as much as you should for yourself.
absolutely, and that comes back to me. It comes back to nurture, right? It's not so much to me. It's not so much nature. There's some aspects there, but it's nurture. It's I would say some nature of that is my mom has the same personality that I do, right? But the argument could be made of, well, that's not genetic, because some people could say it's nature, right? It's genetic, but you could say, or it's nurture, and because she had that personality because of her upbringing, she then kind of transferred that onto me because it was just me and her for a while, right? So but then being in an environment where it's, if you have a voice, you're a problem, right? And that's the biggest thing for me. It's like, if I make my needs known, it's a problem. I'm not allowed to take up space. And that's where, for nines and twos, so like there's positives to that, right? The positive is I can diffuse any situation. I can see all sides of everything, and I'm a mediator. I love it. I love it so much, right? And then on the two side, I will quite literally, like if I'm walking on the street and I see people coming towards me, I will force them to go to my right so that I can be the one that's closer to the road. There's things like the amount of empathy that I have, that I will sacrifice myself for someone else's betterment in a positive way, right? Those are great. And then also there's the opposite side of that I will sacrifice myself to my detriment. I will sacrifice inner peace so that there's external peace, even though I need both.
100%.
Yep, and it's just a constant battle there, but it comes down to that nurture, but then learning, and you need someone to teach you, preferably need someone to teach you, but if not, then some people end up learning themselves to find that happy
It just takes
balance.
longer.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
That is something I wanted to touch on too, because you mentioned how 30 something years you're finally getting it figured out.
Yeah.
It's okay. It is okay. It is
Hmm.
okay to be in your 50s, 60s and figuring it out and then making that change. It's just that point to come over that hill. Like, it
Yes.
doesn't matter how long it takes you to get there. Just know that you are worth going over that hill. You are worth
Hmm.
cresting it and seeing what's on the other side, regardless of your age, or level in life, because that's where it's just a game. We're all
I
leveling
love
up.
that you said
That's
that.
right.
And I really,
Amen.
really believe that is, if you had to boil it down to, a couple of things or whatever, I think that people generally, in and of themselves, don't believe that they're worth it, that they're worthy
Yeah.
of good things, of healthy, loving relationships, of abundance, of, that like that really it comes from that. This is my own personal belief. I'm not licensed in shit, but experience. I'm licensed in
Yeah.
experience. I think that children in their innocence believe in themselves. They believe they can rule the world. They can do anything. They have no fear.
Hmm.
They have no boundaries of their capabilities. But
Right. Yeah.
then as they grow, they have more boundaries put on them. Some are good. Don't touch that hot stove, or don't run in the street. But then also don't think maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't try out for choir. Maybe you're, not really. Do you really want to do that? You're not really coordinated. I don't think you should play basketball. You know what I mean? Like little things
Yeah.
like those. So you have natural boundaries that are healthy. And then you have these other
Yeah.
boundaries that kind of just like box us into that. And so other people's beliefs of whether we're capable of singing or we're capable of playing or we're capable of creating or painting or narrating or doing whatever the fuck it is, like we believe what they're projecting their belief in us onto us, and then we believe it. And so I think at some point you have
Yeah.
to
Yes,
take
but
ownership of yourself. This okay, I had to take ownership myself, so I'm just going to say this is what I did. um of allowing other people to tell me I wasn't worthy or that I wasn't a good whatever, blah blah blah. I had to take ownership of that and be like, I
Yeah.
believed it. So now I need to change that.
I love the ownership thing. That's huge because the only person who can change your life is
100%.
you.
Yep.
Like, that's it. What you said about people saying that to you, um, Chris, is this something that you found too? Did you find through this is that a lot of times whenever people are giving you these things that you can't do, what they're really saying is what they can't do?
Yeah, or what they want to do that they don't want to see you do. That's what I was touching on earlier, right? With the people around where I grew up being like, "Nah, you ain't doing that." Like, no, you can't do that. It's because they can't do it.
Yeah.
They don't want,
Yeah.
or they, yeah,
I think having that piece of, and this also makes it so much easier to let it go, right? Because that hurts. It hurts whenever someone says you can't do something. But when you have the awareness of just shifting and realizing they're talking about themselves, it's less painful.
yeah,
It's able to shift you into more of an understanding mindset of like, oh, my mom is actually talking about herself, and that now I'm
yes,
going into the empathetic mode.
yes. Every amygdala hijack, every situation, even like that, these negative qualities that you see people project, in my view, almost always comes down to some type of broken inner child, right? I'm huge on that stuff. So I have this ability to, since all the work that I've been doing, and recently I felt like that work was unraveled, right? I kind of went into a mental spiral, and I was like, wait, I beat this, which you never beat it, by the way. You never, ever, ever beat it. You just learn to live with these things, and that was a hard lesson to learn again. But I have this ability since doing this healing work to see people's inner child. Whenever I see in a situation like that, if I see two people fighting, just yelling at each other, I can generally see them as children. I can see what they were lacking, what they weren't given, what they should have been given. Now, I don't know exactly how to give them that, right? But that's part of what I love to do with people is work on, let's figure out what you needed that you didn't get. And like that's why you kind of react to these situations this way. And it's amazing when you look at it from that perspective, because I mean, internally, we all have these kids. We all have children inside of this. I mean, I still see little Chris a lot of the times. That's where whenever I do this thing where I'm like, I, you know, don't deserve to be on this podcast. Different things, right? I will, if I sit down and actually think through what I'm thinking, I can see myself of this awkward, chubby, glasses wearing little 10-year-old, right, who has all this stuff happened to him, and he's sitting inside me saying, he's like, I don't deserve that, I don't deserve it. And you almost have to, and it sounds goofy as hell, right, but you almost have to be like, you do, and you did deserve it, and you do, right? And as the adult, you literally say to the inner part of you, like, I'm here for you. You give yourself what you were never given as a child. And it's awkward to do that sometimes. It is. It's the same thing as awkward as to when you sit and do a mindful technique where you're like thinking about anxiety and you're like, going through and like, I feel it in my solar plexus. And then you sit with it for a little bit and then you go, okay, what is it designed for? Because all emotions were given to us for a reason, including anxiety, right? So you're like, okay, you're doing, this is what you're doing. Maybe you're preparing me for a potential, I don't know what it is, but thank you for that. I appreciate it. And this is weird, right, guys? But then you're like, thank you for that. And I don't need that. I don't need your help with that anymore. And, and I'm going to take back control. And you literally like let it go. And it's weird doing it, but it works. Same thing with the
Yeah,
inner child.
But I love that,
I love that.
because and I something that you said just a few minutes ago was you can see what they need, but you don't know how to give it to them. But I think that you just
Mm-hmm.
answered your own question. You cannot give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
I can show them how to possibly figure that out for
Right. But if
themselves,
they don't
right?
see
Help.
eventually,
Yes.
like I personally think it really, you have to, it comes back to ownership. Like, nobody owes you anything, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I
Mm-mm.
mean, you are responsible for yourself, for your actions, your reactions, your words that you speak, the things that you think, the way that you behave. Like, you are responsible for that. And, you know,
Yeah.
and you have to figure out, why do you do that? Why do you do some things? Some things are great and okay, but maybe sometimes
Yeah.
the way that you treat people, or, you know, whatever, treat yourself, whatever it is, have enough self-reflection and get to know yourself enough to look at that and
Yeah.
be like, okay, why do I do that? Or why do I think that way?
Yep. Okay, this is weird. Weird tangent, a little bit. Okay. I was thinking about like how I want to be able to help people and want to guide, like help guide that. And I was like, okay, well, how many times do we? I'm a big fan of, well, I'm a big gamer, anyways, which everything pop culture. But I've always loved like Final Fantasy, right? Heavy, 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 like character management emphasis games. How many times in life do we actually sit down instead of questing and questing and questing and exhausting, using up our stamina? Do we sit down and go into our character sheet and manage our stats and reallocate where we need to reallocate and replan? Like, I don't feel like we do that enough in life. And then you get to a certain point where it's like the load is so much and you're like, I can't do it now. Right. And then preferably you get somebody that can kind of help you manage. But I don't know. Maybe my podcast will be like character management or something. I don't
I freaking love that, Chris, because
know.
I'm picturing someone who's been playing Final Fantasy for 6+ months, and here, think of it even like in real life terms. I've been playing this real life for 30+ years,
Mm-hmm.
and I just managed my stats just a
Yep.
couple years ago. Can you just the amount of chaos of trying to understand, okay, where the fuck does this go?
Yeah.
What is, okay, if I add these things over here, it unlocks all this, and now how do
Yeah.
I use any of that shit? Like,
Yep.
that is such a fantastic way of describing that.
Oh, and think about this. Okay, so generally in a game, okay, because this is what I do, right? So generally, when you're planning out your character, you're looking at what is like the ultimate skill. What's that end thing on the path, right? But there's so many paths inside of that you can take, and I don't. This is the problem that I always had. I would never look at the milestones within. I'd be like, but I want that at the end. Right. So then you're like, okay, but you can go this way to get there, or this way to get there. And sometimes this trait was like, was that really what I needed? And was that really what's good for me? Right. But really, now that's kind of on the opposite, is looking at the trees for the forest and actually looking at the details. But you have to have that balance of both. But we just don't do it. And it all comes back to sometimes that core, right? The inner child that never got what they were not supposed to, what they needed to get.
Do you think,
I love
yeah,
that.
me too. Do you think that part of, I don't want to say the problem, but it's a little bit of a problem, is that people in this day and age, we have so much distraction, right? We have the phone, we have the TV and a bazillion freaking channels that you can watch, or, unlimited music, or, whatever. Like, they're scared to get quiet.
Oh,
They're
yeah, I
scared
can
to
tell you
get
that's
quiet
a problem for
and
me.
really, because then you have to listen to the voices going off in your head and, sort through that.
Yeah. When I don't have my kids, right? I've got them like 4 days every other week, right? Right now I've had them for longer, but they're about to go back to their moms, and I'm like, I'm going to be alone again, right? So what do I do when I'm alone? I have extreme ADHD, right? And I have to be engaged in something. For a long time after getting laid off and after my divorce was finalized, it was I like hard pushed into the TikTok world, right? And I was on the lives all the time, and I was doing my own lives, and I was numbing and distracting myself from my actual situation, which is, Chris, you need to find something else because you lost your corporate job, and you need to, really work on your own growth, because now, like, it's official, you're alone, right? And it's like the part about him was like, see, I told you you'd end up like your dad. I'm like, I'm not like my dad. But because of that, I got to be doing that. I'll be in a live with like Slipknot playing right here, a mobile game right here on my phone because I need the dopamine hit, and like 6 different things. And it's almost impossible to just sit down and be quiet. And I mean quiet, not have YouTube playing, not have music playing, just quiet and listening or just journaling. I mean, there's times even within the past couple of months that I'll get so overwhelmed with financial things that I will I'll have a paralysis thing, like an analysis paralysis thing, and I'll just stop, sit down in my chair, and play zombie waves on my phone because I'm like, I don't know what else to do. And I just sit there and do that, and like 3 hours pass by. So absolutely, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. I don't know if I can find a statistic here, but this has just been off of recent watching a lot of different podcasts and stuff. Some of the most successful people with their time have flip phones still. They haven't even they've gotten rid of smartphones and went back to flip phones, and they get so much shit done. I don't know if I want to do that. I'd like to figure out a way to manage my time
extreme.
Right. But like, it's, the neurodivergence is insane. And that's just gotten so much worse in our society too. So.
Yeah. Well, and just practicing it, right? Just getting to the point to where you can be alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like me and my husband the other day, we had a fire outside, and we didn't even realize it was midnight by the time that we looked at our phones. And he's like, I want to go inside. I'm tired. I was like, okay, I'm not ready to go inside. I'm not tired, and we still have a lot of firewood. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, I can't stay out here alone. That we're on our own property. There's probably, things gonna eat me in the forest. Like I started going through all these things that aren't realistic to now justify not having just alone time with just myself.
Yep.
And so I was like, no, fuck that. The worst case scenario, I do get eaten, right?
Yeah.
Like worst case scenario.
Yeah,
but I'm still gonna try to run. That's still a possibility. So I just sat out there, and I sat out there for another hour just completely by myself. And then when I got to put the fire out and I got to spray down the hose with the rocks on the back of the wall and all the smoke that was going up in the air, there was no sounds, there was no nothing. And I'm just watching all of this go up, and it's not a full moon, but it was pretty bright out. I was like, I couldn't have enjoyed this even if my husband was out here like I am now, because we'd be talking about something, or I'd be giving him my attention.
Yep. And that is mindfulness.
Just having that. Yes. Just having that by myself. Yeah. We deserve that. But it's scary.
I do that. It takes a lot, though, to get to be okay with yourself, though. Like I've been single for a while, and I have a 65-inch TV. I never turn that on. I do not watch TV. my friends are like, I'm like, maybe.
We know your escape, Kathy. We know that you got audiobooks in your ears all the time.
Well, I do, except after work, I need quiet because I'm done with, my brain just literally needs to rest. And so.
Yeah, you got to be able to switch.
Yeah, I don't listen to audiobooks for a while. I don't read. I don't have anything on. I'm just with myself. And I've come to like myself. Like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
That's a huge piece of liking yourself.
That's massive.
Holy crap, Chris. We could talk all day. And so I definitely want to kind of shift a little bit back into...
I was going to say, we can get voice stuff again for a little bit.
No, I love these conversations. We'll definitely have to have you back on for another one too. Yeah. But I want to kind of go into like, what are you working on right now? What does it look like in Chris's world where you are driving towards not necessarily that end goal, but what are these little steps in between?
Right. Okay. Well, I've taken a bit of a break from the projects that I've been on, unfortunately, with financial situation and moving, things like that. I have 4 contracts that I'm working on right now that I've unfortunately had to push due dates back for, but they've been very gracious to me with it. My favorite project that I'm working on right now is actually a sentient dinosaur like fantasy war thing. It's called the Tyrant King, and it's like the T-Rexes versus the Stegosauruses but they're like Stegos, and they have like cool names and a bunch of different characters. I'm excited for that one. It's gonna be some fun voices.
Is that YA or middle age?
I feel like in talking to the author, whenever the last time I talked to him, he did say that it's more of a YA.
Gotcha.
Young adult fantasy. And there's a trilogy planned, so he's only got the first one out right now. but that should be a lot of fun. And then I've got a more of a spicy that I'm working on, and I'm forgetting the title of it right now, but I remember that it's I remember doing the audition for it, and it was like my first ever spicy audition, and I was like straight up just right out there in the audition, and then I was told like, hey, if you do these books, you're going to make a lot of money, like, because your voice saying those words, that was kind of, yeah. So I don't know how much I'm really going to dive. Like I planned on diving into that side more and more, but I'm like, and we'll see. It's not my preference, but I'm not against it. And, yeah, other than that, I'm trying to branch out into more. My problem is I put like so many sticks in the fire. Can't help it. I'm trying to branch more into commercial work, like jumping into video games or like cartoons. The problem is the barrier to entry and having to get an agent, which is I'm looking for right now. I've been playing a lot like at coffee shops and looking more into doing live gigs, because that's kind of my thing, is, you know, singing cowboy, actually the singing hillbilly. So I have a page being built. I got thesinginghillbilly.com. And
Yes.
so that'll be my landing page for voice work, singer-songwriter stuff to book live gigs, and keynote speaking. Because like I said, my biggest thing is I can speak in front of thousands of people. It doesn't bother me. I've done it with acting and stuff like that. So I love the idea of motivating people through, you know, like pulling out my inner Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins and
That's
stuff.
awesome.
Yeah.
Zig Ziglar, oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I think a great way to kind of end this is if you were to give someone a piece of advice, or, you know, that thing that might help that one person, what would it be?
I'm trying to think of the best piece of advice that I've gotten. And are we just talking in general, or are we talking specifically with like narration?
I think in general, I feel like, you know, I feel like this podcast with you could hit anyone just right, you know. I think that if they're a narrator, they're probably still going to gain from whatever it is that you give to the broad audience.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So if I were to say like, biggest piece of advice without getting into a ton of detail is really like, you can, I mean, honestly, you can. Not like Shia LaBeouf, like just do it. Not necessarily that, right? But like, you can, because that's the biggest thing to me, is there's all the time, whether you are a super logistical person, whether you're like acoustically ADHD, or, you know, whatever you're doing, whatever your goal or dream is, you always have something inside you that's like, but can you, right? And it's like, no, you can. And just taking whatever the first step is, and just putting yourself out there and doing it. So I did kind of just say just do it, but just doing it, even if you're scared to death. I mean, branching out and starting out again at 33 years old is terrifying. I'm like, I hit 33 and I'm like, man, this is when Jesus finished his ministry. I'm at like, this is 33 and I'm just like really becoming, in my eyes, an independent adult. It's scary as hell, but you have to take the steps, because you're not going to make it to wherever the end goal is if you're always like, but I don't know, if I just take the step, something might happen. Yeah, something might happen. Something probably will happen. It's probably not going to be what you're thinking, and it probably will be difficult, but we've already talked about it. You can't grow unless there's difficulty. You have to be pruned. You have to be refined, and that's hot as hell, man. It hurts. Always hurts, but you can.
You can. I think that's a sticker, Randy.
You can. Yeah. I also like that you said that you have to be pruned, you have to be refined. That is a painful thing, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
You are my favorite, Chris. I love talking to you. I love whenever we're talking about our Enneagram stuff. Yeah, Kathy, I knew that you'd love talking to him.
Well, I will hopefully. I'm currently looking for more stable work. So I haven't been able to dive back into my projects as much as I wanted to. I just finally got my studio set up. This is not my studio. I got 2 closets in my master bedroom, so I'm using one of those for my laptop. But once I have some stability, knowing that I can not have to do podcasts from underneath the bridge on Parker Road, I am going to start that podcast where I'm so eclectic. It'll literally be like scary movies, West Virginia, personality stuff. It's going to be like whatever the fuck Chris wants to talk about. That's what it'll probably be called. No, I'm just kidding. I like the
Chris wants
character
to
sheet
talk
thing.
about.
I like the character sheet thing. I think we're gonna go, and then I'll do like an 8-bit digitized version of me, like with the beer and the cowboy hat, and it'll be like a little character like stat inventory thing. That'll be
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, you should just name it Chris's character sheet.
Oh, that's cool. Chris's character sheet.
You said the Singing Hillbilly was going to be your website that's being built out for you, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Is there any way people can follow you or connect with you right now?
Yeah. I am not as active as I was. I'm going to try to start being more active, but I am still on TikTok. And I don't know what it's called right now. I think it's the Singing Hillbilly. Should be. Also on YouTube, and those are really the two main. YouTube, the Singing Hillbilly on YouTube. I have like my cover songs up, stuff that I've just recorded, and some game streaming stuff, which I haven't been as consistent with. But yeah, those are the two main ways. Or just text me. My number is. I'm just kidding. I shouldn't do
Oh my
that.
God.
I don't care. I don't care, but I've been advised not to do that. So I don't.
I will advise you not to do that.
I'm going to say
1-800.
weirdos out there, Chris.
867-5309.
Right?
That's it. Elder Millennial for the win.
I love it. All right, Chris, I can't wait to have you
Yes.
back on the show because this is not the end of our conversations, and
Nope.
I'm excited to see where you go with your stuff. I want to be a part of the looking glass where I'm like just watching all your
Absolutely.
shit happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. It was great.
Yeah, of course. And I look forward to continue maybe actually co-hosting sometime and, following through. So
Well, you just got to get you the right link first.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Sitting in Zoom for 3 days straight. I haven't eaten in 3 days.
Oh, we're so bad. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of L3. We can't wait to see you on the next one.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening.